Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Vibes podcast. I'm your host Majid. Today I'm joined by my regular host, my co-host, shall I say, Brother Rash. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to the show, bro.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for having me. I'm not as esteemed as some of the other people you had on answering questions, so I do appreciate that. Jazakallah.
No, of course, the pleasure, like I say, bro, always the pleasure is mine just to get you brothers on. I mean, you're part of the setup anyway, but generally, get brothers on, share their thoughts. It's good, get the thoughts out. It's important. How's everything else? Generally, everything good?
Yeah, it's been interesting in that, like you said, everything seems to have taken a backseat. Like I mentioned this as well yesterday, but everything like, in the past, watching football or, playing football, following other things that are going on, the Cricket World Cup is going on, all of these other things genuinely have just been out of, not even in my thought process. And I'm sure the same with many Muslims. I'm not saying that, something wrong with that, but it genuinely, these last couple of weeks, nothing else is on my mind apart from what's going on in Palestine and Gaza. I don't think this has ever happened before. So yeah, genuinely don't know about anything else. Been busy with work and just thinking about this. Really, that's the genuine truth.
Yeah, it's the same, bro. To be honest with you, it's the same, and I'm sure it is the same for loads of other people as well. But let's get into the topic of discussion today. As everyone knows, what's happening in Palestine. What started off. Well, what the media want you to think started off on October the 7th, but we know the last couple of weeks have been kind of crazy. The live genocide of Muslims being carried out in real time has been on the news constantly. And as Muslims, we're feeling the pain, whether it's in the khutbahs and whether it's speaking with people. It's like as if this is on people's minds. And generally, I think as an ummah, we are feeling the pain. And that's why, to be honest with you, we had a discussion and I said, Rash, I want to record a podcast with you because I know that you delivered a khutbah yesterday. And I saw a little snippet, and it was quite a unique angle because when we're speaking to people or when we're listening to people talk about this topic, it's very negative, and obviously so, because what's happening isn't nice. And the angle that you took in your khutbah, which I've only seen a small snippet of,
yeah,
was more geared towards the actual positives that as an ummah we can take from the current situation. And I know that you went into 5 positives within your khutbah, which inshallah, hopefully I will watch later on. But I thought, what would be good is recording a podcast, going through those 5 points and, giving you an opportunity to elaborate further on them, because I know when you're delivering a khutbah, you're restricted to time and stuff like this. So you can't really go into as much detail as you would like to. So yeah, bro, on that note, just over to you now, really, whether we can discuss the sort of 5 positive points and see how we go with that.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. No, and I completely agree with you. These are the type of topics that need more detail. And again, I know, we can't do it justice in like an hour or so in a podcast either. All of these can be discussed in more detail. And some of the really good brothers, some of the activists, some of the people that have come on many of the news channels have done, a very good job and will have done a better job than I'm going to do. But I think they're important. And I'd also say maybe I wouldn't necessarily use just the word positive. My angle was around, why we should be hopeful and why we shouldn't lose hope and why we should still be confident. So yeah, you can kind of say there's a positive element to that. But what I was trying to highlight to my congregation and our congregation was that, look, yes, the times are very, very difficult, but this is part of Allah's plan and we need to be able to utilize it to grow. And actually, it's not quite as bad as you might think. Yes, obviously, it's atrocious for the ones that are suffering it, but maybe there's a lesson in it for the rest of us. And then I basically broke it down into 5 points, just because, in a khutbah, it's nice to have like a good number of points that you can then reiterate at the end. So, and again, we'll post it on the Voice of the Ummah, the Votu channel on YouTube. So if anybody wants to watch that later, they're welcome to. But clearly, if they watch this is more going to be a bit more detailed than the khutbah. But again, maybe I got a bit more emotional in the khutbah, so it might be good from that point of view. So what I thought we'd do is I'll mention the first one, and I'll give a few of my thoughts, but I would love to hear your thoughts about it as well. So what I was saying basically is the reasons for not losing hope. My number one reason was mainly around the correct Palestinian and Islamic narrative being out there in the public domain, not just amongst Muslims, but also non-Muslims and the wider, humanity or human race at large. My point really was around, I started it with the fact that Netanyahu waved up the map at the UN showing all of Palestine completely wiped out and all of it being Israel, illegal state of Israel. And, there was no Gaza, there was no West Bank, it was just one color and it was all, it was all Israel. So at the end of the day, that's where it started 2 weeks ago. And now look, yes, there's been much bloodshed, but look at the Ummah at large. They are all behind this cause. They're all behind this cause. Palestinians are speaking about it. Muslims are speaking about it. Non-Muslims are speaking about it. The media itself, where they had a certain narrative at the beginning, they're having to backtrack a little bit. Again, the main, the main protagonists, they're going to do what they do. They're state funded. They're state funded, so they're going to continue to push the US line and the UK, the British narrative, but a lot of the other stations are having to pull back. So my point really was that, look, any idea that the Palestinian cause was gone, or that, these normalizations can continue to happen without an uproar from the Ummah, this episode has put it right smack bang priority number one. So really we have to look at it from that point of view. And the second bit of it, and then come in and, add some to this as well, is that the media side, I think, has been very interesting because, they have tried their utmost to paint this picture of, the resistance, the occupied are at fault rather than the occupier. The oppressed are the ones that need dealing with rather than the oppressor. That's what they started with, and that unraveled because many of the people started going, wait there a minute, you've got selective amnesia. The history didn't start on the 7th of October 2023, did it? History started over 100 years ago. The Palestinians have been suffering, the Muslims have been suffering. So you can't just suddenly go, let's draw a line in the sand and start from here. So the media machine are being exposed. They had to actually make things a lot worse than they even were. It was bad enough, as if it wasn't bad enough that people were being killed, and they had for them what is a lot of people, more people than have been killed at any of the times when there's been, in the different year, 2014, 2010, all of those times when there's been a conflict. And again, I don't like calling it a conflict, but you know what I mean. Every time those things have happened, they've suffered the most losses this time. So you'd have thought it's enough for them to suffer that many losses, and they don't need to exaggerate. They've got the state apparatus, yet they needed to exaggerate. There's a word for it. It's called atrocity propaganda. That's the word I was looking for. So the notion of atrocity propaganda is a notion that's studied. Atrocity propaganda is that when something happens, you use that to push your narrative. Okay. And so, but you'd have thought Israel have lost a lot of lives. So you thought that would be enough for them to push their line. But why did they have to go further and made up things like the 40 beheaded babies? Why did they have to go further and mention mass rapes? Why did they have to go further and mention that all of the people at that the rave or whatever were killed, when that's not the case. We saw loads of people running away. We saw even that girl that was apparently killed, her mother's since said she's still alive. So they had to push this narrative just to get their view across, and it's unraveling quickly. So again, I'll just say that bit for now. But yeah, really that number one that it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on is that Palestinian narrative has completely been put back on the map, and the media has been widely exposed for their incredible bias and for their lack of journalistic integrity.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No,
that
of
was
course,
number
bro.
one, basically.
Some fantastic points, bro. And you see this, to be honest with you. I mean, on social media, if you like, I'm mainly checking Twitter, X, or TikTok, and every video is, and to be honest with you, a lot of it is non-Muslims who are now calling it out for what it is. And it's really good how you mentioned what Netanyahu did only a few weeks ago, because maybe from their point of view, you have all these countries that have normalized. It seemed like their normalization with the Saudis was just literally, round the corner. At a position now where everyone has forsaken the Palestinian issue, the issue that the pressure that's going on there. But now 2 weeks later, it is different, and it's you see this from people. Why? Because I think a lot of people now are looking at it even from just a human point of view. And I think in modern times, what's different is the internet and social media has been able to put out there an opposing narrative, whilst before you would have the newspapers, which were generally run by the state or by the capitalists, like Rupert Murdoch and people like this. So it was always just one narrative. But now people are seeing it. Wait a minute, these people have been oppressed. The people in Gaza have been, having had a blockade over them for 16, 17 years. Just think about how people were going crazy, bro, where for a year or a year and a half, I can't remember how long it was, people were told to stay home during the COVID crisis, right?
Yeah.
Corona. And people were losing their minds. I remember when I went into isolation once for 10 days. And, bro, when I left my room, it was like I'd entered a new world, right? Honestly, and that was 10 days.
Yeah.
So you also think about the thousands of Palestinian prisoners who are, in incarceration and are in solitary confinement for years, bro. For years, forget 10 days. So this is all getting out there now. And like you're saying, the fact that they had to make the story sound worse than they are. Now, look, I don't want to be clipped here, and I'm not saying that people didn't die. However, I truly believe that no one was raped, right? This is not what the Muslims do. This is not certainly not those who are the, resistance fighters, mujahideen, whoever they belong to, whichever faction they belong to, babies being killed, all of this stuff is, from my point of view, was just propaganda.
Yeah, I'll give you another reason why I agree with you. And again, I'm not saying no one was killed. Clearly, people were killed, and clearly that's why they've gone in so hard this time versus other times. So there's no doubt people were killed, no doubt at all. And if any innocent person is killed, then that's a travesty, and innocent people shouldn't be killed. Yeah, at the end of the day. But I've got another reason behind that, because did you recall at the beginning, when it was all happening, the type of videos that were coming out of the resistance were showing them, treating the people that they were capturing or the houses that they were going into, treating them nicely. If there was an old person, there was this one interview that went viral, where there's an old lady and the Palestinian resistance, whichever faction they were from or whoever they were talking to her in a nice way, and they even mentioned that they went off and got a banana from the kitchen or so. Like they knew that, look, we're not going to kill innocent people. We've got to do what we've got to do. And the narrative that was coming out, the videos that were coming out. And again, someone might say, okay, that's propaganda from the Muslim perspective or from the Palestinian perspective. Yeah. However, those were the initial videos coming out. There wasn't, where were, the worst video they put out initially was that half naked woman in the back of the truck. And they were saying, look, it's a dead civilian. And later on, apparently she's not. Okay, the way they treated the body and all of that, we know that that's wrong, yeah, at the end of the day. But the initial narrative...
I didn't see that. I didn't see that.
Yeah, I think she was in the back of the truck and you could see some of her skin. So it looked like maybe it was a dead person. And some of the people that were on the truck were like celebrating and shooting in the air and things like that. But at the time, the narrative in the media was going around about the beheaded babies. And it was going around about how they're treating this dead body of an Israeli or of someone, of a non-Muslim. But later on, that apparently is the girl she's in a hospital now and her mother's trying to get her back and she's alive. So all I'm trying to say is at the beginning, the narrative that was getting out there was trying to show the resistance in a light where they were doing what they needed to do because they're occupied and they're trying to resist. Yeah. But then doing it in a way where they weren't trying intentionally to harm civilians. And where they did come across civilians, they were treating them well. Can you see why the opposing narrative needed to overcome that? I think it was at that point they went, wait there a minute. If that's the story that gets out now, and it's English speaking and the video quality is good, and all of a sudden we have to overcome that somehow, we need to pump in lies to do the atrocity propaganda that I mentioned. And then that did actually switch the narrative. When they started putting out, certainly in the UK, they're like stories of the children and their backstory and the mother's story and the grandparents' story. And they really, and I've said this to you on previous podcasts, haven't I? Because the same applies to Ukraine. So what they do is when they want you to feel sorry for a certain side, they show you this like very humanitarian, go and speak to them, spend hours with them, bring footage, show them crying, blah, blah, blah. And they get you to instantly, naturally go, I feel sorry for that person and I therefore feel sorry for their cause. They did that from the Israeli perspective. They didn't do that from a Muslim perspective. The Muslims' perspective was Hamas or ISIS. Straight away, Hamas or ISIS. So can you see it's really convenient for them to paint the picture in a certain way without giving any backstory, without giving any previous context. So I think that's why some of that kind of the way they push the lies and how they're doing now with the bombing of the hospital as well. Everybody's buying into the BBC's view of it. Wait there. Channel 4 have done an opposing view. Al Jazeera have done an opposing view. There's other media stations. There's this other one that I saw today called Forensic Investigations or something. They've got over 100,000 followers on Twitter. They do investigations and I think they're independent or something along those lines. Yeah. Again, you've taken the BBC view. How convenient. What is it? Krishnan Guru Murphy. You saw his interview, didn't you, on Channel 4?
No,
so he was interviewing the Israeli ambassador in the UK. Yeah. And he was pushing it. She was like going, oh, didn't you see the BBC interview? And he's like, wait there a minute. The UK is obviously going to push your line because UK and US are allies. And okay, she carried on waffling on, but yeah, exactly. Of course, if you go to your allies to get the what is right and what is wrong, your allies are going to support you. Why are they not allowing independent people to go in and check? Yeah. So anyway, but I'm just saying they try to really mold the narrative, and I do think the narrative has gone in the favor of the Muslims. Did you watch what's his name, Bassam Youssef? The Egyptian comedian. And
to be honest with you, when I watched it, the first time I attempted to watch it, I watched about 30 seconds, and when he started to say, I love Ben Shapiro and stuff, I thought this guy's a waste man, and I turned it off. And then other brothers were sending, I think, why are they sending me this interview for? Until then I realized what he was doing.
Exactly.
the angle that he was coming
He
from.
went. He used satire. He used satire as a way of completely deconstructing. Piers Morgan was not ready for that. Shall I tell you that interview has got more views than any of the other views? It's got 16 million views on YouTube alone. And that doesn't include all of the people that have shared clips on TikTok, on X, and all the other channels. That's just YouTube alone, because he did such. Again, we're not even saying what his solution is correct or anything like that. A lot of the people who have spoken have had ideas of solutions for Palestine that don't fit the Islamic correct solution, right? However, they've completely deconstructed the Western narrative, and he did it in such an amazing satirical way that Piers Morgan was like, every time I ask him to condemn, he just condemns and he goes, "Oh, I hate them. They're criminals." So he didn't have a follow-up question. A lot of people won't appreciate how brilliant the approach was, because imagine someone's interviewing you and you're like going, how do I best answer this, without falling into a trap? Yeah, which is what these news anchors are skilled at doing. They're skilled at pushing you into a trap. And Bassam Youssef, he just brilliantly, he was just like, yeah, I agree with you. But you could tell he was lying because he was doing it satirically. And Piers Morgan couldn't really answer back. He was like, oh, okay, well, he's agreed to it. Then how do I follow that up? If you get another chance to watch it properly, it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, no, I think I watched it a couple of times, bro. But that Piers Morgan, I mean, we're going slightly off topic a little, but that Piers Morgan is one slimy character, bro. He is. But
Yeah.
going back to your point, I think you make a valid point that that narrative now is out there. People are seeing through the lies, and I really like the point that you made, that they've had to really exaggerate and even bring in lies just to try to show them as the victims, and to show the resistance as being bad, to the extent where they've likened them to ISIS. And I think the point for that is linked to your point, but I also added to that is, I think by them linking it to ISIS is kind of dehumanizing the resistance, so that their actions, what they're going to do, and you probably noticed this as well, just think about this, there's been these Israeli politicians on interviews, and what they've been referring to is, how did the Americans and the world coalition, how did they deal with ISIS? Weren't civilians killed then as well? So you see why. Because what they're trying to do is, you did the same thing when you're fighting ISIS. So these guys are ISIS. So what we're doing now, how can you talk about collateral damage or civilians dying?
Yeah, there's three things I feel from a terminology. There's always this thing called a terminology war. Yeah, they're very clever, and you can tell it's happening when every single media station says the exact same thing. And that's why most of these media stations are all linked and all get communiques. Sorry, go on.
Can I guess them?
you can easily guess them.
I don't know. The first one might be Israel has the right to defend itself.
Yep.
Probably. The second one is, do you condone the events of October the 7th?
Yeah, well, these are the questions. So, yeah, say these are definitely the ones that they all agreed upon.
I'm not sure about the other one.
Okay, anyway, so let me give you the terminologies, though, is what one of you said is conflate, saying Hamas or ISIS. That's one of the terms, and that's very intentional. And the two things can't be compared. At the end of the day, one was an externally funded group that was planted in the Muslim lands and, you set up by the West. And the other, at the end of the day, whether, yes, it's designated as a terrorist organization, but they're a resistance movement. The two things are very different. But anyway, the terminology was conflate Hamas and ISIS. That was number one. Yeah. The other one was calling it their 9/11.
Yes.
Yeah, the other one was very much calling it their 9/11, because if you call it their 9/11, they can then do whatever, the US did in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the third one, I've suddenly just lost it. It'll come back to me in a minute. But there's these terminology wars that they meant. Oh, sorry. The third one is always saying Gazans. Rather than Palestinians, rather than Muslims, it's always termed against the Gazans. Wait there a minute. Like Bassem was saying, why are you not asking the question of West Bank? In West Bank, they've been killing Muslims, they've been killing children. In West Bank, there's problems. In West Bank, there's all of these deaths, but there's no Hamas in West Bank. So he made that really, really pertinent point. So always calling it Gazans, always saying Hamas or ISIS, and always referring to 9/11, I personally thought was very intentional, because if you ingrain that in people, then the actions that then happen afterwards are justified.
Yeah.
So there's
No,
probably more, but those are some that kept coming back to me when I was
I think they're the
watching.
key. I think they're the key ones, bro. I think they're key ones because they have their objective. One is to deal with them how they want to deal with them, and go against, like, we don't need the UN the same way the Americans did. We don't need a UN resolution. Our national security is at risk. We're going to do what we want. And the other one to do with the Gazans is further removing it as an issue with Palestine. But before we move on to the next point, the next positive or positive reminder,
Yeah.
I want to mention one quick thing on this one is that, as Muslims, we have fallen into a bit of a trap, and without realizing. And what I mean by that is we've had people go on these interviews and stuff, and Alhamdulillah, I think they've done a fantastic job. But I think what they have slightly been able to achieve is, even when they refer to October the 7th and stuff like that, that we have kind of condoned the resistance, right?
Mm.
Even unknowingly, because they're linking it to beheadings and kids and stuff like that. Resistance is resistance, bro, right? And if I'm going to use the standard of the president of the colonizing settler state, when he said basically that the people in Gaza, they're not innocent. To think that they didn't know what was going to happen is fanciful. So basically, collective punishment is the way forward. What you have to understand is that from the Palestinian point of view, just think about this now. From the Palestinian point of view, the rules of engagement may be different to how we see it. So what we see as innocent, they might see as different. And linking it back to the comments of Herzog, right, is to them, they will view everyone as a settler who's there. And especially you're talking about that area where close to Gaza. Remember, these are the same people when Gaza was being bombed, they were sitting on the hilltops with the popcorn and watching it like this was some frigging TV show, right? So from their point of view, bro, is these people are illegal settlers.
You saw the Netanyahu interview from many years ago. It was viral yesterday on X about when he was saying that hitting the hospital and killing innocents. This was, I don't know, back 30-40 years ago. In his interview, saying that's fine. It wasn't intentional, but it's okay. It's not terrorism. He basically said hitting a hospital which has got children in it is not terrorism. So you're right. Exactly what you said. They don't see it that way. And maybe I see where you're coming from, but it just, the reason that from a context point of view, it just doesn't stand up from, Western media. So if they say, oh, when they keep going, oh yeah, they have a right to defend themselves, blah, blah, blah. But the issue is, and I think actually Mohammed Hijab on this point did really well, because he was saying, look, you can't call the occupiers, they're not the victims. They're in that, what did he say? Something like forward stance. They're in the, I think that was a very good.
Is in the aggressive stance
or something along those lines. I thought that was a very good point, because wait there a minute, because otherwise you're victim blaming. At the end of the day, okay, fine, the victim can do something heinous, something really, really bad, but you can't take away from the fact that they're still the victim. No matter what you do, you can't take that away. And okay, from the Israeli perspective, they might go, oh no, we see all them as settlers, but historically that's just utterly bogus. And people need to go to actual historians, independent historians, and people who have spent their entire lives writing about that region and the conflicts that have happened there for centuries, as in previously as well, and they will see that all of what the Zionists argue is fallacy, And on top of that, they'll even argue that Zionism itself isn't linked to historical Judaism. Yeah, so actually, anybody who does some proper research, or just go to, again, don't go to a Muslim source, go to non-Muslim sources of history if you want to, and they will expose the lie of, that they're not the occupying entity and that they somehow have a claim to this land. It's utterly bogus. So I know where you're coming from. Their stance is, we can kill whoever we like. At the end of the day, they're the ones that, shouldn't be here. But that doesn't stand up. That doesn't stand up. Even by their own international standards, that doesn't stand up.
No, I'm talking about from the Muslim point of view, bro.
A Muslim saying that?
Yeah. From the Muslim point of view, what I'm trying to say is, think about this now. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up is just to get people to think about it, because I think what we've done is we have, using the sort of like framework of, humanitarian international law and this sort of stuff, we have condemned, in a way, the resistance for the operation they did. Now, we're condemning it on information that we don't, first of all, we don't even know is true. Secondly, you have to understand from their point of view, these people are settlers. Yeah, if the Israelis are saying, well, everyone within Gaza, surely pays the price for Hamas. So everyone who is linked to the initial settlers who took over and established a state in 1948, and these people have been expanding, right? And the fact that majority of the people have to be trained in the military and so on, you can understand that from a point of view of the resistance when they're going out, look, killing babies and raping women and stuff like that. The reason why I'm not bringing into this, I don't believe that happened, right? And I'm linking it to Islam, I'm linking it to resistance, I'm linking it to our previous examples of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi and stuff like this. So we have got some sort of context to fall back on, that how we behaved. But you look at the Zionists, they haven't got anything positive in their dealings of other people, whether it's Christians or Muslims, since the state established, right? They even bombed the King David Hotel where Sunak was staying. These guys have short memories. So the only point I was trying to say, and I want people to think about it, I don't want to spend too much time on this, is that have we, not openly and not intentionally, by kind of like condemning what happened on the 7th, but we're saying, yeah, but it never started then. But are we condemning what happened on the 7th based on the stories that we've been told?
I see what you mean. Sorry, it's a bit nuanced it's a bit of a nuanced point. I probably didn't see what you were trying to say there. Yeah. So just by constantly going, oh, but look, what about before then? Are we kind of condemning that by default? I see what you mean. Yeah, without actually going, wait there a minute. The whole occupation, take that into context in the first place. It's not about condoning or condemning that particular event. It's all linked, isn't it?
It's all linked, but why is it that the people in Gaza, the people in West Bank, why is it that they've not believed the stories about the babies and the rapes and stuff like that? Otherwise, I'm sure, from a human level point of view, from an Islamic point of view, they'd say, listen, resistance, guys, I think you went a bit too far. You can't do this. They're supporting these resistance. They haven't turned against the resistance.
But I think your point is... Yeah, I think your point about some of the things that have been, people might have by default condoned. I think your point is valid. Where is the evidence for some of those things? The fact that their one story about the beheading of the 40 babies turned out to be complete fake news. How do we know a lot of the other things that they haven't said are fake news?
It's difficult for me to say, not from a biased point of view, because everybody would be biased, right? But just think about it, bro. The Mujahideen, right, who are sacrificing what they have for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for their homeland, for Aqsa, for Quds. Do you think they're going to rape women? Come on, bro. I'm not going to believe that unless I see it with my own eyes. And look, it could happen in the sense like some rogue element might just do something, right? Maybe his family members in the past were raped by some Israeli soldiers and he thought, time for payback. Could be, but from a policy of resistance, like the way they say it is as if this is part of the policy of their resistance.
Yeah,
bro, you understand? The Serbs did it.
Mm.
It was a policy of their
It was
warmongers.
policy. It was the way to
Yeah.
instill fear
It
in
was a way
the,
to instill
yeah,
fear, right? Because rape, a lot of the time, rape isn't to do with the sort of sexual satisfaction. There's to do with the humiliation aspect.
humiliate. Yeah.
Bro,
Mm.
I'm not gonna believe that our brothers and sisters in the resistance who are fighting, who are ready to give their life up, are gonna do something like this. So I'm not gonna believe it, and I'm not
Yeah.
gonna believe they're intentionally gonna kill babies or children,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah, that's the main
I'm
point.
not gonna
That's the
believe it,
main point. Yeah, yeah.
and so that's why when we say, yeah, you know what, we condone what happened on
Yeah,
the,
because there's an element of you almost saying that if those things happened, we advocate it when we don't. And but it's because we don't believe it happened. But if it did, we don't condone it.
that's why if somebody asked me that question, what I would say is from an Islamic point of view, it's prohibited to target civilians, to
To be fair, though, the reason why I've never even got into that conversation is I just think that conversation lacks context because it's just it's the victim blaming thing again. You just get into this unnecessary conversation and you can't just start the events on that day and then try and explain them going forwards. You have to go backwards. But yeah, no, it's a good nuanced point. Sometimes maybe we haven't realized that, and maybe we might have fallen into that trap to do that. But yeah, I think like you say, it needs context.
that was just a quick point because
Yeah,
I don't want us to belittle the resistance of our brothers and base it on lies. We haven't seen any evidence, right?
exactly.
So why
100%.
are we going to believe their frigging narrative when we know they're trying to dehumanize the resistance for world opinion? And very quickly linking it to your point, to summarize, the point you were saying is the fact that on a world level now, people are seeing, the struggle for what it is. They're seeing who's the aggressor
Definitely.
and they're
Yeah.
seeing who is being oppressed.
Yeah.
And that's why to sensationalize what happened on October the 7th fits into that, because they want to sway, they want to change that public opinion. Bro, move
Definitely.
on to your next point, inshallah.
Yeah, so the second point was really about unity. So my main point that I made in the khutbah was, look, the bombs on the people pressing the button to send the bombs in, they don't care whether you're a Sufi, a Tablighi, a Deobandi, a Brilvi, whatever you are. They don't care. The bomb doesn't care. The person pressing the bomb doesn't care. At the end of the day, it's Muslims that are dying. It's Muslim blood that is being spilt. And what has happened is the Muslims themselves have united regardless of those denominations or regardless of those classifications. Yeah. So, yeah, there's been a fringe that have said things that we're against, and that was one of my other points I'll make later. But generally speaking, there's been unity on this point, and there's been also an element of realization. There's this realization that the problems that are in the world are because of our disunity, as in the problems that the Muslims are facing. And I think this experience has shown so many people going, wait there a minute, we need to come together. We're united behind Al-Aqsa. We're united behind Al-Quds. We're united behind Palestine. We don't care how we pray if we have slight differences in our methods of prayer. At the end of the day, we're one. We're one body, like the Prophet ﷺ said. We all feel the pain. And the fact we all feel the pain, and such pain, tears of pain that people have been when you're watching these videos, they're absolutely heartbreaking. The amount of tears I'm sure has been spilt, would have been more than the blood spilt over the last 2 weeks, because people are heartbroken by seeing, worst of all, the children. That's the bottom line. Over 1,000 children, being butchered in this way. I think as human beings, there's a certain type of feeling towards children versus if it's an adult. The children, these are helpless children. Yeah. And I think there's been this unity. So that second point was very much around unity. And one of the things I kind of expanded on that one is that obviously the verse of Surah Al-Imran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in translation, hatred has appeared from their mouths and what their breasts conceal is greater. I really reflected on that in these last 2 weeks, because there were people that I knew personally that I would have thought they'd have been a bit more, let me see what the truth is, let me listen to both sides and then make a conclusion. But there were many people who just listened to the media and immediately went with the media narrative. I'm talking non-Muslims here, yeah, because they've and again, these are people who question COVID. These are the people who question the government. Wait there a minute. You question your governments. You questioned all of the stuff that happened over the last few years. You question the US and their foreign policy. Yet, how is it that you've instantly, the media, what the media narrative is, you've instantly taken it. You saw all the front page just when the beheading stories came out. You instantly took it. And I think that hatred element, and again, I caveated it with maybe some people have just been brainwashed and maybe it's not true hatred, it's just easily being able to influence them. But the verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, it really came to light. That means that, someone you wouldn't imagine utter saying something like that has said it. That means what's inside is worse, because it takes a bit of effort to say something, especially if you've not heard this person say it before. That means they fostered those feelings inside. So I think for the Muslim Ummah, they recognize this, and there's this conscious element where they're going, wait there a minute, there is more hatred for us than we think. We do need to unite, and let's unite behind this cause. We do need to come together, and the categorization shouldn't matter. And the last thing is that I kind of highlighted that what's interesting is this kind of coming together this time is slightly different, because it's come off the back of seeing our children being taught LGBT in schools. It's coming off the back of the banning of hijab and jilbab and stuff in France. It's coming off the back of seeing that MPs are doing absolutely nothing for the Muslims, and those kind of solutions that people might have gone to are failing. Yeah, or have failed, not failing, have failed. So the number two was very much around that unifying element. I think people are realizing that the only way is to unite, and we need to stop all of these debates and constant, bickering about things, little things that divide us, when actually far more unites us.
Yeah, really important points, bro. Really important points. And to be honest with you, there's not a lot to add to that. I would say that one thing that's important for us Muslims to understand and appreciate is that in the world there are two camps. There's the camp of Islam and there's the camp of Kufr, the camp of the Haqq and the camp of the Batil. Ultimately, we are one ummah, and everybody else, doesn't matter whether they're atheist, whether they are Christian, whether they are Hindutva or whatever they are on the other side. And even though they have enmity amongst themselves, they will always unite when it comes to Islam. And I think you're right, you're completely correct. This incident has shown that a lot of Muslims, other than a fringe movement, have kind of like not entertained this issue of, well, listen, you pray like this, you pray like that. Because look, in reality, we have more in common than we differ. And what do we have in common? Are the kind of fundamentals. We have one aqidah. We believe in the same creator. We have, one qibla. We have one previous qibla, right? So, when these people are attacking Islam and they're attacking Muslims, then they're not, like you're saying, they're not going to identify who believes this and who believes that. Indiscriminately, they just see Muslim. And that's all I would like to say on that. I mean, the other last point is based on the feelings of the kuffar and some of the things that they come out with. And I think, you know what, bro, I think you're right. A lot of it is down to ignorance, because we have been seeing a lot of people, and I'm telling you, a lot of the content I see that is exposing what's happening, that's exposing the Al-Ahli hospital attacks and so on, are actually non-Muslims, bro.
Yeah.
Because there is still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created with this fitra, and we have this aspect of humanitarian value that we want to achieve. So we have within us this feeling towards fellow humans, right? But nevertheless, there are some people that are being brainwashed. And one thing I would say is that a lot of it may be down to racism, bro. Because when you have people like Piers Morgan, and this guy, this guy thinks he's friggin' smart. And on all the podcast, on all his interviews, you might listen. There's one thing he's consistently said. You know what? I just don't know what is a proportionate response. He tries to make out like it's such a friggin' like difficult question, right? Intellectual question. What you're saying is racist because what you're saying is 1,000+ people died on October the 7th, just say, whether that number is correct or not. Just say, let's say 1,000, and let's say it included children, and let's say it included women and elderly. And actually, one thing which is kind of linked to point one, when you were saying these kind of buzzwords that they're using, another buzzword that they'd be using is Holocaust survivors.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
these people survived the Holocaust, and now look what's happening to them, right?
Yeah, that's very intentional. Yep.
That's very intentional, right? So now when you're saying that 1,000 people died or 1,700 people, but then you're saying actually over 3,000 people have died, they've lost their homes, they've lost their businesses, and that's not including the people who were injured. But I don't know when Israel should stop. What is proportionate? That's racist, bro.
That's racist.
Because what you're saying is, an eye. What you could argue is an eye for an eye, right? It's not eyes for an eye. It's an eye for an eye. If that was your stance, right? That okay, they killed 1,500 of us. You can go and kill 1,500 of theirs. The fact that they are being constantly bombed and so many people have died, and you got people like this who are talking about, I don't know what a proportionate response is, bro. This is racism, right? And this feeds into the people who are watching. So I'm not surprised, like you're saying, there are some people who hold these views because they are gullible. But one last point, you make a really good point, which is that it's more than them being gullible, bro. You know why? If these people question Corona, if they question the government policies, so they're trying to make out like they're not just sheep.
They think they're free thinkers.
They think they're free thinkers, but on this, they quickly took an approach without verification, without anything. Why? You know what, bro? Because, there's inner feelings.
Yeah.
It was compatible with that.
You just reminded me of something. I can't remember who it was who tweeted it now, but someone tweeted something like, the countries that all came out united were all the colonialist countries. They all came out supporting Israel. I know a lot of people supported Israel on this one, but the initial tweet or whatever that came out was like France, Britain, the colonialist countries. And someone made this comment about, where there's, what's the word? The muscle reflex. So they were going like all these colonial countries had a muscle reflex that, when they saw another colonialist entity being attacked, their muscle reflexes kicked in and they had to condemn the what's it called, the colonized rather than the colonizer. I think that just reminded me of that when you mentioned.
Exactly. And to be honest with you, there was one point that I was thinking about over the last few days was that, in some of these interviews where people don't want to shift from October 7th to 1940 and before then. And you're thinking, okay, some of these countries would find it very difficult to do that. You know why, bro? Their existence is built on
that premise.
Genocide, on removing the native people and building their civilization, their state.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how can they talk about people who are being kicked out of their homes, who want to return? They can't, because their history is built on this. So
it's part of their fitra,
bro, 100%. So that's why they will never entertain that this problem is started from Balfour Declaration or even before then. They would never. Why? Because what you're highlighting then is how a foreign people came into a land and removed the indigenous people and colonized them and subjugated them. Bro, that's exactly what they did in America. That's exactly what they did in Australia, in Canada. Anyway, bro, let's move on to your third point.
Yeah, no, good. So the third one is there's elements that are linked, but again, the good thing is the first one was the longest, so it shouldn't take too long to get through the rest of these. So number 3 was really, this has highlighted who is on which side of the fence. If you were ever in any doubt that if there's fringe groups within the Muslims, there were some people blaming the Palestinians themselves. Some people literally saying the Palestinians have the wrong Aqidah and therefore they're suffering. There was some fringe people, and we can just shun those people who said that now. It's very clear whose side they are on and whose side the rest of the Ummah are on. There was also some people who went, oh, why did they do this? Look, they brought it upon themselves, blah, blah, blah. Again, some of them may have been politically naive, so I'm not going to completely say shun them, but they need to be educated, because at the end of the day, look, don't forget the 100 years of oppression. You're not in their shoes. You don't know how to live like that, and you don't know what you would have done. Many of you might have even gone, you'd have done worse, but you haven't lived it, so it's not your place to turn around and say what they should or shouldn't have done. But then also, like the MPs, the brother in Birmingham who's taken the vehicle out with pictures of the MPs that haven't said anything. Have you seen that yet? Yeah. So again, many people are realizing, wait, they're not on our side. Okay, they got our votes for the people who vote, and wait there, why are they not speaking out at the very least? In fact, I think it's in Luton, it's been publicized that some of the MPs actually stitched up some of the community leaders to the police for speaking pro-Palestinian. Wait there a minute. You guys were elected in by the Muslims that do vote, and you were put in positions of power and authority, and you're not saying anything pro-Palestinian, and you're not doing anything to help the Muslims. So this the third point really was around, you can really, really more easily identify those people that are on the truth, those people that are on your side, and those people that are not. And at times when that gets blurred, it's difficult, isn't it? I'm talking about scholars and people as well who, you've seen some of the I'm not shy to say it, some of like the Mudkali scholars and stuff, and some of the rubbish that they've been coming out with. Yeah. So it's really highlighted to the Ummah that wait a minute, these people are amongst us, and they're the ones that are always going to be a reason for our disunity, a reason for our destruction, a reason for confusion, a reason for misguidance. That's what they are, and we need to shun them, or we need to correct them, and we need to speak out against them, and we need to unite against them, so that we're all united as a ummah, and these fringe and these external people who are trying to create division within us are gone. And again, it highlights some of the solutions that people thought would potentially work, like lobbying the governments, asking your MPs. We've seen what's happened. In fact, some of the non-Muslim MPs have shown more backbone than the Muslim MPs. The non-Muslim MPs, some of them have quit their jobs. Some of them have spoken out pro-Palestine. Some of them have spoken out against Keir Starmer. As you know, a lot of Muslims vote Labour. The ones that vote, they vote Labour. Wait there a minute. What's on your conscience now? That, firstly, you saw what the Labour leader said. Secondly, the Muslim MPs, the majority of them haven't said anything. What does that say about the system of voting? Someone's going to argue, the counter argument is, oh, some of the Muslim MPs have been gagged. They've been told, you can't say anything pro-Palestinian. You have to toe you have to toe our line. Wait there a minute. Don't you see a flaw in that? You've voted them in to speak for your interests, and now they're being gagged and they can't. Wait there a minute. Doesn't that show an ultimate fallacy of that system?
But
so we need to wake up.
Just to build on that, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you to speak the truth, enjoin the good, forbidding the evil. That's the creator, that's the Lord of the universe and all creation, the King of Kings. But you're being gagged by your frigging party leadership.
Exactly.
That's silly.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the third one. Again, it was a short one. It was really about, look, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you throw the falsehood, you throw the truth against the falsehood and it smashes its brains. This highlights that the truth is, obvious. The falsehood is also very, very obvious in times like this. So later on, when they start to go, oh yeah, listen to me for this reason, you can immediately go to them and go, where was your voice when what was happening in Palestine? Where was your voice? Where were you talking in defense of the Muslims when this was happening? Again, not just MPs, like scholars, even imams of mosques. I'm going to say even imams of mosques. And again, I know some of them maybe felt I can't speak out because, might get in trouble, etc. But no, every single member in every single mosque should have been talking about it. Okay, be nuanced. You don't need to be as blatant. Maybe you'll get in trouble. But this whole issue, look, international law says resistance is allowed. So you're not talking, no one's asking you to break the law. Everybody's asking you to speak the truth. That's why you're on the minbar. Speak the truth, speak for Muslims, be careful how you say it, stick inside the rules, but don't not speak about it. And I bet there was still a fair few mosques. And again, I don't want to blanket say this. I heard it a little bit that there was some mosques that weren't speaking about it, but I would question every imam that's in a mosque that hasn't spoken about this. I would genuinely question them in that. I would ask them why. Why haven't you spoken about this? But we should go and speak to them. We go, why aren't you speaking about this if they haven't?
Yeah, that happened at the at my local. To be honest.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but I think it was. I don't think it was intentional. There was an older gentleman who was delivering a khutbah in Urdu, and I think it was basically, I think it was pre-planned, like maybe ages ago, because what they do in the mosque is they'll have like agreements with people who do like some charity to build mosques or stuff like this, and then they will allow them to deliver a khutbah as well. So bro, I went into the masjid, right, and first of all I'm thinking, what's this guy talking about? Obviously what he was saying was Islamic, so I'm not knocking that, but I was like, in the context of things, I was like,
yeah.
And I was thinking, listen, okay, I'm about 5 minutes late, so maybe he's gonna do a 180 or something, yeah. But it had nothing to do with what was going on, and I was looking around, bro, and I was seeing people frustrated, right? And I was chatting to one of my relatives, maybe yesterday or the day before, and he was saying to me, he goes, bro, were you there at the khutbah? I go, yeah, man. He goes, bro, this next man was vexed. And that's when I realized, you know what? I was right in my,
they
gauging.
don't read the room sometimes. And
bro, this guy did not, it's not even him. The committee, like, come on, wait a minute. You know what's happened? This is the first Jummah khutbah after the event of what's been happening. Surely just use some common sense. But anyway, I'm not knocking the masjid as such, because, like you said, people make mistakes and we should question them. What was positive from that was, bro, people weren't having it. You could see people were frustrated because, as you mentioned right at the beginning of the podcast, this has been on your mind for a week and a half, 2 weeks or whatever. You can't really think of anything else, right?
Anything else.
And that's how other people feeling. They come into the masjid, they're expecting to hear some words of wisdom. So maybe, some words of what's happening, what should we do, what should be our response. You expect that from the minbar.
Well, even, again, I don't agree with this approach, but there were some messages that I heard were very much just continuously going down the dua route, continuously just going down the perfect your heart route and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I think that is wrong in that, yes, you do that, but there has to be action with it. Yeah, we know dua is the weapon of the believer. We know we should be doing dua, but we should be doing some action with it. So, but at least I'll give them the credit that at least, when you're... Actually, I say I'll give them the credit. I might counter that in a second, but I give them the credit. At least they spoke about the issue. At least they spoke about it and they gave their congregation something to go away with. The reason I counter that slightly is it would frustrate me as well, because some of them then pacify their congregations. The congregations coming there all hot, all wanting to do something, and then all of a sudden you send them away going, you can't do anything, just do dua, just just perfect yourself, just clean your heart and this will get better. I think actually that's counterproductive. So I might argue that actually not saying anything is better than that. Allahu alam. I'm not the one, someone can certainly put a counter argument there, but I think actually that's counterproductive. But having said that, I can't believe that some mosques didn't speak about this.
Well,
It's frightening.
the positive is the fact that, again, linked to this point, because
Sorry, yeah,
your point here about the two sides wasn't to do with, from what I understood, non-Muslims and Muslims, is within Muslims.
Yeah.
Within Muslims, people have exposed themselves. And I think
Yes,
that's the
that's
key
the point.
that I would add to that. And even like you said, when you mention MPs and stuff, I don't really give too much time to that. But one thing I would say is, for all the Muslims, I'm not even saying this from a Sharia point of view of whether you're allowed or not, but the people who vote in the democratic system, they need to ask themselves, these parties have shown that they are not friends of Muslims, unless there's another party, right? But when it's the next general election and you're going in and placing your vote, are these people your representatives? And I think that's the question that we need to understand, and also be careful of people. I didn't watch the full video, so I don't want to quote too much of it, but I saw a video of Yasser Qadi, and he was talking about, we have to do things as Muslims about what's happening in Gaza, right? And what he
Yeah.
said is, one thing is the physical fight. He goes, we can't do, and that makes sense because we're not there. He goes, the other fight was that fight of ideas and stuff. So I think, okay, this is getting interesting. And then he said, he went on to say, so how do we do this? Is by becoming more American. And that's when I kind of switched off because he was talking about, you know, being in the democratic process and blah blah blah. And I was thinking, all right, like I said, look, maybe he did a full 180 afterwards. I didn't watch the rest, so I'm not saying that I watched the entire thing because I couldn't. Honestly, I physically, time is limited. There's loads of things on
There's
the
much
internet
better
that
things
you
to
need to
watch, bro.
read and watch right now, right?
Mm.
That were one of them. But anyway, so bro, moving on to the next point, inshallah.
Yeah, so number 4, you might have caught, the clip that I sent that you've seen. Number 4 was that clip. Number 4 was the one I kind of pitched as, most of you are going to be surprised by this, because number 4 is, they are scared of us. They are absolutely scared of us. I'm talking about, the ones that are against Islam, because we're sitting there going, wait there, they're bombing the crap out of our lands. They're killing our brothers, sisters, and our children. They are oppressing Muslims around the world. How can they be scared of us? But actually, the point I was making is, we've seen the aircraft carriers going in and being on the outskirts of Palestine, in the water next to Palestine. And you have to ask the question to yourself is, why are they there? They're not there to help the Zionists bomb more the Muslims, are they, in Palestine? They're there to make sure some of their puppet rulers don't come out of rank based on public opinion and suddenly do something to Israel. That's what they're scared of. So,
or people topple
people topple their governments, and there's some kind of a reaction, or the armies break ranks and do something. So wait there a minute. If you weren't scared of that, you wouldn't be sending that, because certainly, the Muslims of Palestine, their resistance has been, imagine against a power with so much. Look what they've achieved. But they don't need any additional help, although they're getting another 8 or 10 billion from the US anyway, but that's in weapons and funding and stuff like that. But so my point really is actually the Muslims are on the ascendancy, whereby, look, the whole world, or all the Muslims around the world, are talking about this. Muslim numbers continue to increase. And my main point in this area is that they must be sitting there going, look, for 100 years, we've been oppressing these people. We've been trying to secularize these people. We've been instigating war in their lands. We've been killing them. We've colonized their lands. We've pumped their lands with alcohol and raves and entertainment, and given them all of the freedoms and all of this democracy and all of these things. We have gone out of our way to push Islam out of the Muslims. And actually, the opposite is happening. Whenever there's votes, Muslim people who have any kind of Muslim kind of identification, they're the ones that come into leadership positions, like, say in Turkey, regardless of how secular they are. At the end of the day, you need to play the Islamic card in order to get into positions of power. So in other words, the Muslims, I was highlighting to the congregation, the Muslims are on the ascendancy, and whilst they, from their outside, they are haughty and they are trying to oppress the Muslims and they are showing their strengths, they're scared of us. They're scared of the Muslims uniting. They're scared of the Muslims rising. They're scared of the public opinion amongst the Muslims toppling these puppet rulers. So how scared they must be? They know the rule is theirs, most of them. Yeah, they know they've put these rulers in place, yet they're still scared that those rulers, A, might come out of rank and do something, or B, that might get toppled. So that if that's not fear, I'm not sure what is. Okay, someone might say they're just being strategic, but wait there a minute. They've been doing this for decades now. They write, their think tanks write reports, and Rand Corporation, and all of those things that they're doing in the background. They're investing a hell of a lot of money, and they have been all of these years just to fight Islam. And yeah, okay, that makes it harder, but that should make us realize that we're on the truth, because no matter how hard they try, we still continue to go on the ascendancy. And this one instance of what's happening in Palestine should make us realize that, wait there a minute, they're not going to get rid of us this easily. At the end of the day, there's still 2.2 million or more Palestinians in Gaza, Muslims in Gaza. I know, okay, there's some Christians and stuff there as well, but there's still Muslims in Gaza, and they themselves are the front line for us at the moment, sadly, and we should be able to do more. But look, they're scared, and that's why a lot of their strategies are dictating that. And if we look at it from that more positive point of view, then we should be like, okay, that means we need to keep going. If we were thinking, no, they're not scared of us, they've completely subdued us, we're nothing, then all the opposite's going to happen. We're just going to go, you know what, it's not worth the fight.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. Just to add to that, I think there's just a nuance. I think there's an important point. They are scared of Islam, which is why they are doing this. And what I mean by this is, if Muslims are far away from Islam, then they think they have pacified them, even though they know that there's still something within them that can trigger some change. But the further they're away from them, they can, at least they can rest easy a little. But when they see that actually these people are getting more towards Islam, it becomes a problem, because their worry is, their fear is about Islam. Their fear is, how can you beat a people who, if they are victorious on the battlefield, then they have victory. And if they are martyred on the battlefield, then they also have victory. But remember, this isn't genetic. That having that mindset isn't a genetic. It's the way you carry your deen. It's the way you carry Islam. So they understand that the more people are getting closer to Islam, their reactions are going to get more, I would say, what's the right word? Their response is going to be more harsh. You're going to see this. So in the same way, look at Iblis. You just say there's a Muslim, the guy is drinking alcohol, he's on crack, he's a pimp, he's doing all these things. So, I'm trying to paint a picture of a bad guy, right? The Iblis is like, yo, I don't even need to do waswasa to this guy, right? And he's that much off the rails. But there's always a possibility he might just bump into a friend who he used to go to college with, who's going to give him some sort of nasiyah or something like that, and he can change. But as soon as Iblis and Shaitan starts to see, wait a minute, this guy's starting to mend his ways, his attack's going to become more severe. He's going to be worried. He's going to fear. So I think this is what that fear is. The fact that, even though we've got our leaders, we've got our puppets who are keeping these people down, you know what? I'm thinking of this. Just say like there's a big pot, right? of some, I call it biryani would be stereotypical if I said that, right? But just say it's a stew or something, like it's at boiling point. And you got these rulers who are sitting on top of the lid. And you can think of a cartoon where it's like it's going up and down, the steam's coming out, it's going up and down, they're holding it down, right? Okay, they're holding it down, they're keeping it in, but there's a possibility that boom, it might erupt. And they can't do that. They can't
that would make a very good visualization. You should go on AI and describe that, and maybe it'll draw it for you.
You know what? SubhanAllah, it could be, but but actually it's based off what you're saying.
No, but I actually really like your point, because it is Islam that they fear necessarily more than, us at the same time. But however, let me just kind of highlight something as well on that. And you kind of touched on it anyway afterwards. The reason why I said it's us, there was a bit of intention behind that, to be fair. The intention was that you're right, because it is Islam that they fear, but what's frustrating them so much is that it just takes, like you said, something to happen to trigger even the least Islamic Muslim. The least Islamic Muslims are speaking out for Palestine. They might not pray, they might not fast, but when it comes to the Palestinian issue, they're on point. And from their point, that's what they're scared of. They're like, wait there a minute. We get them to leave their deen, or not leave their deen, sorry. We get them to, drink. We get them to do this. We get them to leave, because of the secular society. We get them to practice less. Yet all it takes is something to trigger that innate, what they grew up with, what they were passed down from generation to generation. And suddenly they're back and they're a threat again. And when I say threat, I mean threat to their ideology versus Islam. So it was very intentional to say us, because we need to recognize that we shouldn't just view it on what some people are saying, you need to, it's only when you perfect yourself, and then, you've got to clean your heart and all of that. And again, to clarify, we have to do that. I'm not saying we don't do it, but what it is you make the population docile, and you subjugate the population by just saying work on yourself, but don't work on your community. Work on yourself and don't work on the rest of the ummah. So that's my point, really. And I think that's what they're scared of. They're scared that it can. Your imagery is brilliant. It just takes that can tip the boiling point, and some people could be cold in that boiling pot, but it's the others. They're scared of the others that are at boiling point that just nudges onto someone else. So yeah, I really love your analogy.
And one last point, I think it's for Muslims who may look at the situation and be totally despondent and stuff like this. And let's stick to this example of the boiling point, right? When water is being boiled, just say you're making some, you got some eggs, and you're getting late for work, and you want some boiled eggs, you want a bit of protein in the morning, right? And you're like, come on, water, hurry up. But the water is going to do what it needs to do, right? The properties are going to, warm up in the way they have always done since forever, right? Until they get to a certain heat, 100 degrees, and it's going to hit boiling point and it's going to boil, right? Now, if you don't understand the history of Islam, if you have not really looked into your deen as much, and so on and so forth, and you've not read about the courageous history of Muslims and Islam and so on, you could be there thinking nothing's happening. Look at the water. Friggin', it's been on the stove for so long, right? Nothing's even happening, right? But the one who has more insight, he knows that something is happening, because every degree that the water is being warmed up by is progress. And at some stage, it's going to hit boiling point. The problem is the person who doesn't understand the process of water being, boiled, he's only going to realize something's happening when he sees the water get to boiling point. Yeah. But what we have to understand is, okay, look, some may argue we are at boiling point, and I wouldn't disagree, right? However, what we have to understand is that to get to this boiling point, it's taken a process. It's not all of a sudden that the Muslims have just all of a sudden start caring about Islam and care about what's happening with the ummah. Things have taken a natural course. There have been people out there speaking about Islam and so on. And what we're seeing now, and the enemies know this, the kuffar know this, right? Hence why they're trying to change our curriculums and all these things, right? Now we're getting to a stage where it could be boiling point, and what they want to do is they want to just put that lid on that pot. Right, they can't. They've tried to turn the heat off, right? And unfortunately, and especially looking at the recent events, it seems like, whoa, this fire now is still going to burn. We can't put it out. Okay, we can probably lessen it, but we can't actually put it out.
Yeah, and they strategize. They'll be thinking of plans and ways to do this, and they've been doing it for generations. And that's why we're not at that point yet where we can, immediately effectuate change. But it's your point, it's the degrees are going up, no doubt, even if it's not at boiling point, or even if it is, the degrees are going up. In fact, the other thing that I mentioned was that, there's lots of other avenues that this is happening on. It's like, recently there's been these number of podcasts, that when DH went on a podcast in, which one was that one? The PBD podcast or something.
Yes.
So there's these podcasts that are happening, and they're seeing that there's Muslims debating intellectually against Christians and against other people. And more often than not, what you're getting is, and a lot of the comments and stuff is like people going, wait there a minute. At this time when LGBT and secularism and all of these things are being pushed, it happens to be Muslims that are the ones defending the correct values for some of the other religions as well. So there's a genuine ideological boiling point, and there's clearly like a physical boiling point as well, where people are just going to go out and just want change. And I think they can come hand in hand. And this idea of them being scared of Islam and them being scared of us, it's about being scared that there is an alternative. And that alternative is frightening for them, because the alternative is something that destroys all of these ideas of, the super elite having all of the wealth. The alternative is correct distribution of wealth. The alternative is getting rid of poverty. The alternative is back to a family of a mother and a father and children. The alternative is getting rid of all of these things that freedoms has led them to. So over time, people are going to be, wait there a minute, that alternative is what we want. And these debates and these intellectual things that happen online, they're contributing to that, because more and more people are going, wait there a minute, you guys are pushing too hard. You're pushing too hard on your liberal, left-wing liberal ideas of, modernism. And actually, they're tipping them towards our boiling point, if you know what I mean. Because, there's a notion of a bit of a tug of war. It's not just one-sided. In the same way, I've said this to you a few times, in the same way as their societies are decaying and going downwards, our Muslims largely are becoming more and more understanding of what Islam says and how it solves those problems. I think the two happen together, and it can go up and down because there's strategies always being played out. But I think it is certainly going in the ascendancy for Muslims and Islam.
Alhamdulillah. And before we go to your final point, what I would add is that what you've mentioned there, this struggle, where it's a struggle of ideas, a struggle of narrative and so on, is something that all Muslims should be part of. So if Muslims listening to this are wondering, well, look, what can I do? These are practical things that as Muslims we need to be doing.
Yeah, we need to either be involved. We need to be involved in intellectual debate. We need to be involved in the battle of ideas. If we're not, then that was going to be my question at the end that I ended my khutbah with. So I will save a bit of it for then. But if we're not involved in that, have we really contributed to your boiling point?
Subhanallah.
I've given my conclusion away now, but we'll come back to that. But yeah, number 5, and the most important, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on our sides. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's his plan. This is our problem sometimes, is we think according to our own plans. We're thinking idealistically in terms of our limited knowledge of what we'd like to happen, how we'd like to do it. But we only have a few of the parameters. What is it that Hamza Zortzis always says? We have the pixel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the picture. Yeah, I like that analogy, because when we're thinking of a plan to get the Muslims to victory, our minds are so limited. We can only see so many variables. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees every variable. He sees every variable, and at the end of the day, this is part of his plan. This is part of his grand plan. And what I've heard this couple of weeks is that verse more than any, you know, the one that goes, and never think that Allah is unaware of what the wrongdoers do. He only delays them for a day when eyes will stare in horror. Every single video of a baby that I have watched, you get heartbroken where you think, how can this happen? But do we not have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do we not think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see that too? He can. He can see that, and he has his plan, and we don't know his plan. And often we only realize later that there was wisdom in something happening, however difficult, however, you know, some of the earthquakes, some of the, you know, natural disasters, all of these things that are happening. These are part, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of all things. At the end of the day, the people who die, look, we're all going to die. The people who die, they're the ones that are dying in Palestine, they're in Jannah. You know, they are fighting, they are being bombed, they are civilians, they are children. You know, may Allah accept the shuhadas. May Allah accept them. But, you know, we have to appreciate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on our side. He is the best of planners. And look, they thought they could get away this time with pushing their narrative, and that everybody would just believe their narrative and they'd be able to get away with it. They haven't got away with it. They haven't got away with it at all. In fact, the alternative narrative has got out there. On top of that, a little ironic thing that I was thinking is that it was how long ago that Elon Musk took over X or Twitter originally. And isn't it slightly ironic that a lot of the truth from the Muslim side, from the Palestinian side, that's got out in the social media that is controlled by them, has been since some of the changes that he made. He made some changes that allow more voices to be heard. Okay, I'm not saying they're not blocking some of the content they are. There's been a talk of there being meetings with some of these Western powers, with some of the owners of these organizations to say you need to clamp down on the Palestinian voice. From their point of view, they're going, oh, on the, you know, the voices of people pushing the false narrative, but it's not. It's the correct narrative, a lot of it is. So it's amazing that as part of Allah's plan, that things happened in the way they did. There was suddenly an opening up of free speech to an extent, you know, more being able to be pushed out there. Whereas a lot, you can't post the same stuff on things like Facebook, you know, or on some of the other channels. Look, TikTok has allowed more of it. Okay, China funded. I know they clamped down a lot of stuff as well, but X, a lot of it's been on Twitter. Again, how? Because there was a way, the sequence of events. Again, Allahu Alam, I don't know if that, why that happened, but when you look backwards, you go, okay, that actually played into the actual narrative getting out, which I find quite interesting. And, you know, Allah knows best at the end of the day. But yeah, number 5, to conclude on that one, is very much about, it's Allah's plan. It's not our plan. Allah is on our side. Do we not believe for a second that Allah has control over all things? We do. Do we not believe that Allah does everything with hikmah? He does. Do we not believe the outcome is in the hands of Allah? It is. Do we not believe that we're all going to die and we're all going to, you know, be resurrected? And then we will see what Allah's plan was. We believe all of that. So we shouldn't get disheartened. Yes, we should get upset. But the upset should instigate our emotions and then instigate our minds to do what Islam tells us to do. Emotion is important. So it's not about not being sad. Of course, we're heartbroken for our brothers and sisters there, but that should lead to that emotion, and that emotion should lead to us wanting to do something, but we should be wanting to do that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do. So the number 5 was very much around it being part of Allah's grand plan.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. The only thing I'd like to add to that is you look at the ayat you're talking about. Allah is the planner. Everything happens by his permission. And then I would say you link that to another ayat, which is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks, do you think that, you know, you will be left to just say I believe and not be tested? Which means that the tests, what happens within the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will test people in different ways. So Allah's telling you things are going to happen and you will be tested. But then link it to the last ayat that I want to mention is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah does not burden a soul with more than it can take, i.e. the scope, which means that everything happens because of the reason of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Through what happens, we are being tested, whether that's through ease, whether that's through hardship, and then we are accountable on how we respond to that within the remit of our response and our capabilities. And I think that's what we have to make that link, because that's what it ultimately boils down to. Yes, all these things are happening. We can't look at the good and the bad because they're happening through the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how are we responding to it? What are we doing? I think that's really important. That's really all I could add to your point number 5.
No, I remember you made this point on another podcast, and I think you did a clip of it, which is another reason why I remember it. And it's such a good point, because you know what? I know why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't put me there, because I'm not as strong as some of these or any of these Palestinians. I don't know what you think about it, and you try to put bravado on it and think, yeah, I'll be out there, I'll be fighting, blah, blah, blah. I'll be protecting my family, I'll be resisting. But you know what? We're weak in comparison to them. I think you made that point. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them there and put us here, because maybe Allah saw some other values in us that maybe we can do something here, and clearly if we were there, maybe we wouldn't be able to resist the way they've been able to resist. I'm pretty sure I couldn't, just because of seeing that some of those videos, when you saw that one brother where he'd lost two of his children. One was a baby, one was like 20. He lost both of his kids, and he was just still, of course he was heartbroken, but he was just saying, they're martyrs. They're martyrs. We proceed. We're Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. He was just saying, look, and I'm like, wow, I don't know if I could do that. So you're right on your point. That I think that was a brilliant point you made on that previous podcast. And yeah, it's down to, if we can't be there to be protecting our brothers and sisters, then that trajectory, and this is what I concluded on, was that trajectory, if it's going upwards, well, a wave can go in a certain direction, but you can be carried by that wave, or you can be contributing to that wave. And it's easy to go, Muslims are in the ascendancy, Islam is starting to come back in the minds of people, Muslims are growing. But you know what? If you've done nothing at all to contribute to that, if you've just been sat there letting the wave carry you and letting Allah's grand plan carry you, and you've not contributed in the slightest, then you've got to question whether you deserve any of the reward from that. You've got to question that. And I question so when you asked, let's do this podcast, and I felt bad that, I've seen many of the brothers doing podcasts and speaking and sharing and talking and doing what they could. I feel that, okay, I might have done the odd little tiny little thing, need to do more, because I'm questioning myself, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask me, and okay, it's not enough. It is not enough, but at least I can say I tried the best that I was capable of doing at the time, in absolute hope in Allah's mercy that it's going to be enough for him to say, you know what, yeah, in this instance, I'll show my mercy on you, rather than him going, well, you didn't do enough for your brothers and sisters that were dying. Because that's how it feels. We feel helpless because we're not helping them directly. So I don't want to end on a negative, because I'm just saying that should motivate us to do more. We should think all of those 5 positives, or all of those 5 things why we shouldn't lose hope. But then if we want to be involved in all of those, if we want to say we contributed to all of those, then we need to do something about it. And that's where the action has to come in. And that's why I posed it as a bit of a rhetorical question to the congregation. Look, are you doing anything to help that wave? Are you doing anything to help that ascendancy? And if you're not, it's not too late. And if you are, alhamdulillah, look at what we've achieved already.
Subhanallah, bro. Subhanallah. Yeah, I mean, I can't add anything to that. It's really thought-provoking, and people listening, people watching this, that's what it boils down to. There will be a day when we will be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't want to be standing there as people who were inactive, as people who placed the dunya at the top of their value hierarchy. Ultimately, we need to prepare for that day, even if it's not for people thousands of miles away. It's for yourself. Ultimately, you come in this dunya by yourself, and you're going to leave it by yourself, and you'll stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by yourself. And on that day, even your own body is going to testify against you. So is it not time that we did what we need to? And that point that you made there, bro, about the wave, I think that's really important. We can't just be sitting on the fence. We can't be just passengers on this journey. We have to be participants. But before that, we have to understand, how can we participate? What needs to be done? What's my role? What can I do in my current situation? And I think the honest questions that need to be asked. Everyone's capability is different. Everyone's reality is different. But without asking those questions that you posed, you're never going to be able to answer them, bro. So bro, on that note, man, I want to sort of like hand over the final section to you. I know you probably concluded it anyway with your point, and to be honest with you, I think the last bit that you mentioned is a fitting place to kind of end on. However, you did mention that you had a little bit more that you want to bring out towards the end. So up to you, bro. Any final thoughts? Also, maybe if you want to add a bit more about, plug in the Voice of the Ummah YouTube page or stuff like this, and I'll add the link anyway to the description.
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah, no, the only real final point was that, some people will go, what can I do? But everybody has their own capabilities. We're all good at something. And this is the issue sometimes. We all think, oh no, what could I do? We're all good at something. Some people are good at speaking. Some people are good at creating content. Some people are good at, communication one-to-one. Not everybody's good at communicating to an audience. So everybody's got their capabilities. And I think your point is very pertinent. You need to ask yourself what your capability is, or what your capability could be if you put yourself, set yourself a target, and then how that can then help in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you're right, you need to be off the fence in these kind of situations. You need to be on the front foot, and you need to contribute to Allah's deen, because we will be questioned about it. We will be questioned about our ease, no doubt. Ease is as much of a difficulty. In fact, like you say, and I said this in the last podcast, because sometimes when the calamity strikes you, the people who are living the calamity, you have to act. You can't not act when the calamity strikes you, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a bomb from the sky, whatever. When calamity strikes, you have to act. But the difference with us when we're in ease is there's no calamity. So it's easy not to act. So that's what sometimes makes ease more difficult, because you can just, like you said, you can just sit on the fence. You can just close your ears. You can turn off the TV. You can turn off the social media. You can get on with your life. You can sometimes just block everything out. So that's why there is difficulty in ease as well. So I think we all need to go out of our way to make sure we do what we can. And then in terms of just a quick plug, Jazakallah. So the Voice of the Ummah, or the VOTU channel, will be sharing my khutbah, and we will be sharing our khutbahs there as frequently as we can do. And inshallah, we've also been speaking to some of the brothers that are some of the activists on the scene. I won't mention any names just now, because we need to set them up first, but inshallah, we'll hopefully come out of our COVID hangover and start to do some more content again for everybody. So we apologize for not having done as much as we should be doing, but the intention is to do more going forward, inshallah.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. May Allah bless this project.
Inshallah.
And, hopefully we can reap the rewards on the day when it actually matters.
Ameen.
Which is the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah. Bro, Jazakallah khair really for taking time out for recording this podcast. And it was really, really good in the sense that I'm sure the viewers, those listening, those watching are benefited, because in these dark times, and especially when you can't get away from the social media content of seeing the destruction and the death, I think the 5 points that you summarized for hope, ultimately in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are key. And I think that's how we should look at it, and not so much pity the what's happening to the Muslims in Gaza. Actually, probably that pity should be deflected back onto us. We shouldn't feel, if anything, like you mentioned, they have secured their akhirah, and ultimately it boils down to what are we going to do. If that's what it means to be tested, if that's what it means to be a Muslim, if that's what it means to taste the sweetness of Iman, then subhanAllah, it feels like we're a long, long distance away from that. But on that note, bro, I want to leave it on a positive, inshallah. And for everyone who has anything to add, any comments, questions, please post them on the video. And don't forget to like and share our content. On that note, bro, until the next one, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.